Welcome to the Dark Lore, where ancient worlds breathe in the darkness, and every night is a passage into something older than memory. Tonight, the knight walks to the edge of the known world. Not the edge in the metaphorical sense that travelers use when they mean they have gone further than they expected, not the edge in the sense that the furthest boundary of any map they have seen has been reached, but the literal edge of Aethermoor, as it is understood in the oldest and most precise accounts of what Aethermoor is and where it ends. The place where the world's certainty dissolves into something that the world's certainty has no language for, where the rules that govern distance and direction and the passage of time become unreliable in the specific way that things become unreliable when they reach the boundary of the system that produces them. The void's edge is where Aethermoor becomes aware of its own edges and grows uncertain about them. And the uncertainty is not a flaw in Aethermoor's construction, but the accurate perception of something real. The world has edges, and at the edges the world is most completely what it is, stripped of the comfortable assumptions that the interior permits. He has been walking toward the void's edge for 3 days from the ancient depths, carrying 3 fragments of the Ashen Crown in his pack, with the force behind him at a distance that has been maintained by his pace, and that he intends to maintain until the crown's completion renders the maintenance unnecessary. The void's edge is where the crown must be completed. Sarah's documentation was specific on this point. The completion requires the specific qualities of the void's edge, the place where time is navigable and where the crown, held complete by the person who assembled it, will show that person the force's position and movement and intentions in the clear and complete way that the crown's function promises. Tonight he arrives at the edge of everything he knows, carrying more of what he needs than he has ever carried before, and the edge receives him in the way that edges receive things that have walked long enough to reach them, without ceremony, without drama, simply by being there. The approach to the void's edge is not marked by any sign or monument, but it is unmistakable to anyone who knows what they are approaching. The landscape changes gradually over the final day of travel, the Amber Road's clear definition of path and direction becoming less reliable, the road's amber luminescence fading not from reduced light, but from something else, from a quality of the environment that does not fully support the road's usual relationship with the light it has absorbed. The road continues, but its surface is less certain, not dangerous, not impassable, but less definitively road-like, more like the suggestion of a road, the implication of a path maintained by the accumulated footsteps of those who walked it before rather than by the physical road-making of the civilization that laid it. The air changes, not temperature, which remains roughly consistent, but quality, the specific quality that he learned to recognize in the verdant reach and the dragon's graveyard as the quality of a place that has developed a relationship with time different from the relationship the ordinary world has with it. At the void's edge, this quality is extreme. The air feels older and younger simultaneously, as though it is experiencing multiple times at once, and the experience is expressed in the texture of every breath he takes. Each breath feeling simultaneously like the first breath ever taken in this place, and like one of the last breaths that will ever be taken here before whatever comes next comes. He breathes this air and does not resist its quality, lets it do what it does to his perception, which is to make the ordinary certainties of time and sequence feel less certain without making anything feel threatening, just more open, more available to possibilities that the air of the ordinary world does not contain. The void's edge at night is different from what he expected and exactly what the oldest accounts in the library described. He expected darkness, deeper darkness, the darkness beyond the world's light, the darkness that would exist at the boundary between what is and whatever is not. Instead, the void's edge at night is softly luminescent, the air itself giving off a very faint and even light that comes from no source he can identify. The light of the edge of a world that is generating a slight luminescence at its own boundary. The way certain organisms glow at their surfaces, the light of the interface between the inside and the outside. In this light, the landscape of the void's edge is visible in its extraordinary character, not the dramatic cliffs or the terrifying drop that some accounts describe, but a gradual dissolution, the ground becoming less certain beneath his boots over the final 100 yards of approach, the rock and earth of the ordinary world becoming something less defined, less fixed, more like the ground in dreams than the ground in waking, present and supportive but not fully committed to being ground in the way that the ordinary world's ground is committed. The sky above the void's edge is different from the sky above any other region of Aethermoor. The stars are present, but their positions are not fixed in the way that stars are fixed. They shift slightly when he is not looking directly at them, occupying different positions in his peripheral vision than they occupy in his central vision. As though the stars above the edge are observed from multiple times simultaneously, and the multiple observations do not fully agree about where the stars are. He makes camp at what he determines is the last place of certain ground, the point beyond which the ground's commitment to being ground begins to waver and the walking becomes less reliable than he wants for a camp. The fire he builds is ordinary. He has not been provided a sourceless fire here the way he was provided one in the Verdant Reach and the Dragon's Graveyard, which tells him something about the Void's Edge's relationship to hospitality, which is perhaps that the Edge is not a receiving place but a threshold place, not designed for staying, but for the specific act of standing at the boundary between the known and the unknown and being willing to be in that position without requiring the comforts that positions further from the Edge provide. He builds his fire from wood he has carried from the last forested section of the approach. Ordinary wood producing ordinary fire. The fire he was trained to build in Solheim's guard in field conditions where no prepared fire source was available. The fire of competence rather than the fire of reception. It is a good fire. Small, efficient, warm, steady in the Void's Edge's unusual air, which does not move in the ordinary way that air moves, but circulates in patterns he cannot predict from one moment to the next, the circulation of air at a boundary rather than the circulation of air in an interior. He sets Ashrinder beside the fire, and sits with the pack and opens it for the first time since the ancient depths preservation level, removing the 3 fragments and placing them on the ground before him in a triangle, which is not their natural arrangement, not the linear arrangement of the journey's order, but which seems correct here at the edge where the linear arrangements of the ordinary world are less reliable. The 3 fragments in the triangle arrangement before the fire do something they have not done before. They glow, not with the warmth glow of proximity to each other, which he has felt since the dragon's graveyard retrieval, and which is internal, felt rather than seen. They glow with visible light, the same gray-white luminescence as the ash flowers and the Void's Edge's own air, but in the specific quality of the crown's material, the ash-color light of the fragments expressing itself visibly for the first time in the conditions of the edge where the visual and the essential are less separated than they are elsewhere. The 3 fragments' light is extraordinary, each one producing a point of gray-white luminescence, the 3 points forming a triangle in the dark. And between the 3 points the air is slightly more luminescent than outside the triangle, slightly warmer, as though the 3 fragments are already doing something together that they cannot do apart, already beginning the function that the complete crown will perform when all the fragments are present, already casting the light that the crown was made to cast. He looks at the 3 points of gray-white light on the ground before him and the fire behind them casting its orange warmth over the scene, and the void's edge's own air luminescence around them, and the extraordinary shifting stars above, and thinks, this is what Solheim was building toward, this triangle of light on the ground at the edge of the world, this beginning of the crown's restoration, this first visible evidence that the thing the Force destroyed will be restored by the person who survived the destruction. The void's edge at night reveals its most distinctive quality gradually, as the darkness deepens and the ordinary world's certainties decrease, and the edge's own qualities become more present. Time at the void's edge is navigable. This is what the oldest accounts describe and what he is beginning to experience. Not that time stops or reverses or accelerates in the ways that travelers' exaggerated stories suggest, but that the boundary between past and present and future becomes permeable in the way that the boundary between the verdant reach and the ordinary world is permeable at the forest's edge, passable in both directions by the right person at the right moment with the right quality of attention. He does not pass through the boundary tonight. He is not trying to, has not yet understood enough about how the permeability works to attempt it deliberately. But he can feel it, the way he can feel the quality of the verdant reach's awareness from the forest's edge before he enters, the quality of multiple times being simultaneously present in the same air, the quality of the past, and the future pressing against the present from both sides, and the present being somewhat thinner here than it is elsewhere, somewhat less insistently itself, somewhat more open to the influence of what it is between. He breathes in this thin present, and lets it be as thin as it is, lets the past and the future press against it from their sides, and does not require it to be thicker or more certain than the edge makes it. Because the thickness of the ordinary present is a comfort that the void's edge is not offering and that he does not need from it, because what he needs from the void's edge is something else. He arranges everything from the pack on the ground before the fire, the 3 fragments in their triangle, the bone warm between the first and second fragment as always, the ash flower preserved and glowing its gray-white pulse in correspondence with the fragments. The key whose crown shadow purpose has been fulfilled, and which is now simply a key from a door that has been opened. The torn page with its growing sentence that has been adding words as the journey progresses, the stone figure from the Black Throne's Hall, Riven's map. He looks at this arrangement. Everything the journey has given him laid out in the light of the void's edge, and the fire, and the 3 fragments' own gray-white luminescence, and sees the journey as a whole in the way that you can only see a whole when you have all its parts visible at once. The ash flower that was placed in his pack by unknown hands on the night before the first verdant reach visit, which pointed toward the first fragment, and then continued glowing its correspondence after the fragment was retrieved, because the flower's connection to the crown's material is not exhausted by the retrieval, but continues as the crown's assembly progresses. The bone that absorbed the second fragment's warmth for centuries in the dragon's graveyard, and that has been in full correspondence with all 3 fragments since the third retrieval. Its warmth now the warmth of the 3 combined, the chord of 3 notes that the pack's interior has been producing since the ancient depths. The key whose purpose was fulfilled in the preservation level, and that now is simply the evidence of that fulfillment, the closed object of a completed function. The torn page adding new words as the journey produces new sentences of the future it is recording. The stone figure from the founding, from the beginning, carried from the Black Throne's hall as the reminder of the first stone. He unfolds the torn page and reads what the growing sentence has become since the last reading. The sentence is longer now, significantly longer. The future tense recording a more detailed version of what comes next than it has recorded before, as though the proximity to the void's edge has given the page more certainty about the immediate future, the way proximity to an event always makes it more detailed in its anticipated description. The new words describe him sitting at the edge of the known world with 3 fragments before him in a triangle formation that produces gray-white light, which is exactly what is happening. They describe him looking at the torn page and reading these words, which is exactly what is happening. And then the new words continue beyond the present moment into the immediate future, describing something he has not yet done, but that the page has been describing since it was placed in the library for him to find. A night at the void's edge in which the thinness of the present allows him to see, not to visit, not to interact with, but to see. A specific moment from the past that the edge's permeability makes visible to whoever is present at the edge with the right combination of attention and carried objects. The page describes what he will see. It describes Solheim, not the ruins of Solheim, not the after version that the Force left, but Solheim itself, the city in its fullness, the city as it was before the Force arrived, the king in the hall and the guard at their stations, and the crown in the vault, and the city going about the specific business of a great city on an ordinary evening that the people in it did not know would be the last ordinary evening they would have. The page describes Solheim the way he remembers it, and cannot allow himself to remember it. The void's edge is going to show it to him tonight. He settles into the position the torn page describes, sitting cross-legged before the 3 fragments triangle in the void's edge's thin present with the fire behind him and Ashrinder beside him and the other objects of the journey arranged around the triangle and the edge's unusual air moving in its unpredictable circulation and the stars above shifting in their edge-specific way. He does not know how long the waiting will be before what the page describes occurs. The page is specific about the seeing, but not about the timing, which is appropriate for the void's edge where the timing of things is determined by the quality of attention rather than the passage of time in any ordinary sense. He waits with the specific quality of waiting that the monk cell taught him, not passive waiting, not the waiting of someone who is doing nothing until something arrives, but the listener's active stillness, the waiting that is itself a practice, the clearing of the surface of the mind so that what needs to arrive can find room to arrive. The 3 fragments glow their gray-white triangle before him. The bone warms his awareness from its position between the first and second fragment. The torn page on his knee is showing him the future of what he is doing, which is waiting, in the present tense that the future tense is describing. He waits. The thinning of the present happens gradually and then all at once, which is how the void's edge's qualities work, gradually in approach and then completely in arrival. The quality achieving its full expression at the moment of maximum thinness rather than building to that expression incrementally. He feels the thinning as a quality of the air around him rather than as a visual change. The air becoming less insistently the air of this specific moment and more open to the qualities of other moments. The pressure of the past and the future against the present's boundaries increasing until the boundaries are present but permeable. the way a membrane is present but permeable, passing what needs to pass while maintaining the minimum separation that allows the present to remain the present, rather than dissolving into everything at once. And in the thinness, through the permeable membrane of the now, he begins to see, not clearly at first. The seeing is not the clear seeing of a person looking at something in full light, but the seeing of something that is present in the environment without being of the environment. The way the verdant reaches awareness was present without being visible. The way the dragon's graveyard's breath was present without being audible. He sees not with his eyes, but with the quality of attention that the void's edge is amplifying in the thinness of its present. The same quality that the monk's cell's silence amplified, but here amplified to an extreme that the monk's cell's silence only approached. Solheim, the city in the thinned present of the void's edge, is not a vision, not an hallucination, not the product of exhaustion or grief or the specific quality of the edge's air on a mind that has been traveling for too long. It is a specific phenomenon of the void's edge's permeability, a moment from the past pressing through the thinned present to be perceived by whoever is in the right position with the right combination of attention and carried objects. And he is in that position and has those objects, and the moment is pressing through. He sees the hall, not the empty hall of the Deadlands, not the interrupted sessions preserved architecture, but the hall in its alive state, the hall as it was on an evening before the fall, the king in the throne, and the courtiers at their positions, and the candles burning in their iron holders, and the carvings on the columns showing a history that is not yet finished, but will be finished by what is coming. He sees himself, the captain of the guard, standing at the side of the throne in the position he stood in for 12 years, the armor different from what he wears now, less worn, less specific in its damage, the helmet closed as always, but with the quality of the closed helmet of someone who is doing their job rather than the closed helmet of someone who has made the closing a statement about who they are and who they will remain until the journey is complete. He sees Malachar, standing near the throne as he always stood, at the king's left hand, with the quality of someone whose presence there is so established and so expected that no one looks at him anymore, which is perhaps the most dangerous thing a dangerous person can be, invisible through familiarity. The Solheim that presses through the void's edge's thin present is not the Solheim of any specific moment he can identify. It is a quality of the city rather than a specific event, an impression of the city at its fullest, the city that existed for years before the fall, the city that was the organizing center of the Crown's completion project, the city that the Force destroyed specifically because of what the city was building toward. He sees the great library where Seraphine worked, the library that partially survived the fall and that contained, in its surviving sections, the 17 books that the Library of Forgotten Souls holds, and that gave him the first organized understanding of what the Force is and what the Crown is for. He sees the market district above the underground passages where the Vigil operated, the passages where Sarah and Torvald and the other 6 survivors sheltered on the night of the fall. He sees the vault where the Crown was kept complete, before the Force's arrival required its dispersal, before whoever made the decision to break the Crown and distribute the fragments across Aethermoor's significant places made that decision, knowing the city was already compromised and that the Crown's only chance of surviving the fall was to not be whole when the fall occurred. He sees the city as a living thing, as the organized expression of everything that Aethermoor's remaining capacity for organized effort had produced in that period, and he sees it with the specific grief of someone who knows what happens next and cannot prevent it and is simply seeing. He sees Seraphine, the head librarian of Solheim's great library, in the library, at her desk, in the quality of light that the library's windows produced at that hour, working with the specific quality of work that is not labor, but the expression of the person doing it. The work that someone does when what they are doing is what they are for. She is not as he has been remembering her, which is to say she is not the idealized version that grief produces from memory, but the actual person, the real and specific individual who was also the head librarian and also the woman he loved, and also the person who understood more about the crown's significance than he did, even though she was not the captain of the guard, but was simply the person who had read everything. She looks up from her work once, in the Solheim that is pressing through the void's edge, and looks directly at where he will be standing when he looks at her through the thin present. And her expression is the expression of someone who knows they are being looked at from a direction they cannot see, and by someone whose presence they can sense, but not locate. She is aware of him, not in this moment, not in Solheim's last ordinary evening, but something in the void's edge's permeability allows the awareness to travel in both directions, allows the person being seen to sense the seeing even across the temporal distance that separates the seeing from the seen. He does not know how long he looks at her. The void's edge does not provide reliable timekeeping. He sees Malachar more clearly than he has ever seen him in memory, and what he sees changes his understanding of what happened. Malachar in the Solheim of the thinned present does not look like a traitor. He looks like a man who has made a calculation, which is different, and the difference matters enormously. A traitor acts against their loyalty out of the failure of that loyalty. They stop believing in what they were loyal to and act against it from that stopped belief. Malachar's expression in the Solheim of the void's edge's vision is not the expression of someone who has stopped believing in Solheim. It is the expression of someone who believes in something more than Solheim, something that they are convinced is worth what Solheim costs, something that their calculation has determined is worth the destruction of a great city and a just king and a capable guard and a beloved librarian. Malachar made a deal, not out of hatred or greed or the personal failure of character that the word traitor implies. He made a deal based on a belief that what the Force offers is worth what the Force costs, that whatever the Force's purpose is, which he knows and Aldric does not, is something that justifies the price. This is more dangerous than hatred. It is more dangerous than greed. A person who has made a considered calculation based on a genuine belief about what is worth what is not reachable by the arguments that reach people who are simply afraid or simply greedy. Malachar believes. He must understand what Malachar believes in order to understand what Malachar will do next and what the Force's final purpose is, because Malachar's belief is the key to the Force's purpose in the way that the key's crown head was the key to the preservation level. The vision of Solheim fades the way it arrived, gradually in exit and then completely in ending, the city pressing back through the thinned present to the past where it lives, the membrane of the now closing behind it with the same quality it closed behind the dragon's graveyard's gate, returning to its minimum permeability, the present thickening back toward its ordinary opacity. He sits before the three fragments triangle in the afterglow of what he has seen, not the afterglow of the fragment's gray-white light, which continues unchanged, but the afterglow of seeing, the specific quality of consciousness after an extraordinary perception. The quality of someone who has been given more information than they can immediately process, and who is letting the information settle into the organization that will make it usable rather than demanding that usability from it. Immediately, he has seen Solheim. He has seen Seraphine. He has seen Malachar's face wearing the expression of a man who believes he is right, which is the most complete and the most disturbing thing he has seen in the entire journey. More disturbing than the ruins of the Deadlands. More disturbing than the atmospheric warning of the Force's approach. Because the ruins are the evidence of something done, and the atmospheric warning is the evidence of something coming, and Malachar's believing face is the evidence of something that has a logic that must be understood before it can be addressed. The void's edge in the deep night after the vision has faded is the void's edge most completely itself. The thin present maintaining its minimum thickness without the additional thinning that produced the vision, the air circulating in its unpredictable patterns, the stars above holding their shifting positions, the ground beneath him committed to being ground at this precise location where the ordinary world's certainty ends and the edge's uncertainty begins. He sits in all of this with the three fragments gray-white triangle before him and the fire behind him, and the full awareness of what the seeing has given him and what it has not given him. It has given him Solheim, which he needed to see and which he will carry differently now that he has seen it rather than remembering it. It has given him Seraphine aware of being seen, which he will not know what to do with until he understands what the void's edge's permeability means for what Seraphine is now. The question he has been afraid to examine. It has given him Malachar's believing face, which is the most actionable information the vision produced because it reframes the entire nature of what Aldric is working against. Not a traitor who can be defeated by justice, but a true believer who can only be addressed by understanding what he believes. The void's edge in the deep night holds all of this in its thin present without requiring him to do anything with it yet, which is the edge's most specific gift. The void's edge holds everything that has happened in Aethermoor simultaneously in its thin present, in the way that the verdant reach holds everything that has happened within its boundaries in its rings, not as accessible memories or as navigable history. The void's edge's holding is not the organized archiving of the verdant reach. It holds everything as pressure against the membrane of the now, the accumulated weight of all of Aethermoor's history pressing against the present from the past, and the accumulated weight of all of Aethermoor's possibility pressing against the present from the future, and in the thinness of the edge's present. Those pressures occasionally produce perceptions in whoever is present and attending with the right quality of attention. He has received one perception tonight, Solheim pressing through from the past. But the edge holds more than Solheim. It holds the Force's origin, which is further back than Solheim and less specific in its pressure against the membrane. It holds the crown's making, which is before Solheim and very specific in its pressure, the memory of purpose built into an object pressing against the present from the time of its making. It holds the void's edge's own future, which is the most uncertain of all the pressures because the future is determined by what is done in the present, and the present at the edge is thin enough to be influenced by the pressures from both sides. He does not receive these additional perceptions tonight. The membrane does not thin further than the Solheim vision required, but he can feel the weight of them pressing against the present from their respective directions, the past and the future pressing against the now of a person sitting at the edge of everything with three fragments of the Ashen Crown glowing gray-white before him. She is here. He does not see her approach. She is simply present at the edge of the fire's light when he looks in that direction, standing in the void's edge's luminescent air with the same quality she has had in every appearance. The quality of someone who is the right age for the moment without being any particular age. The quality of presence that the void's edge's thin present produces in someone who moves through time in a way that ordinary people do not. She looks at him with the same expression she has always had. Not recognition exactly. Not the recognition of someone seeing a person they know, but the recognition of someone seeing the correct thing in the correct position at the correct moment. The recognition of confirmation rather than of relationship. She speaks. In all the appearances, all the watching and the parallel walking and the presence at the edges of the significant places, she has never spoken. Tonight she speaks. One sentence, in the common tongue of Aethermoor, but with an accent that he cannot place in any region of Aethermoor he has visited. An accent that might be from a period rather than a place, the accent of a time before the current languages fully settled into their current forms. She says, "The crown is not what you were told it is." And then she looks at the 3 fragments gray-white triangle with an expression that is not alarm, not warning, not the expression of someone delivering bad news, but the expression of someone correcting a misunderstanding before the misunderstanding produces consequences that would be avoidable if the correction had been made earlier. And then she is gone, as she has always been gone, absorbed into the void's edge's thin present and its luminescent air and the shifting stars above, leaving the sentence behind her in the air of the edge like smoke from a fire that has gone out. The crown is not what he was told it is. He holds this sentence in the section of his mind that holds things too important for any other section and turns it in that holding the way he turned the bone in his hand before understanding the mark on its surface. The Vigil told him the crown makes the force visible. Sarah's documentation, which was assembled from the records that the Vigil's surviving members carried out of Solheim on the night of the fall, which was the most complete and reliable documentation available in the current period of Aethermoor's history, which has been the basis of everything the Vigil has done in the years since the fall. This documentation says the crown makes the force visible. The recurring woman, who appears in every region of Aethermoor at different apparent ages and who speaks for the first time at the void's edge with one sentence, says the crown is not what he was told it is. She does not say what it actually is. The sentence is a correction without a replacement, a door opened without a room revealed, a key inserted without a lock turned. He does not know if the Vigil's documentation is wrong, or incomplete, or a deliberate simplification of something more complex, or accurate in what it says, but inaccurate in what it implies, which is a different kind of wrongness and more common in important documents. He knows that a correction has been made by someone who appears in every region of Aethermoor, and who has been watching the journey from its beginning, and who chose the void's edge as the place, and this night as the time, and one sentence as the measure of what to give him, which is the consistent methodology of people who understand how much information a specific person can use at a specific moment and give exactly that amount and not more. The atmospheric warning of the force's approach, which has been present since the dragon's graveyard, and which has been his constant companion on the amber roads and the approach to the void's edge, is stronger at the edge than anywhere on the road. Not because the force is closer. His calculation of the distance has been maintained, and the force should be at the same relative distance as when he last assessed it. But the void's edge's thin present makes the force's approach more perceptible, the way the thinning that allowed the Solheim vision makes other perceptions available simultaneously. He can feel the force's movement through Aethermoor more clearly here than he has ever felt it. Not its direction, which he knew from the atmospheric warning, but its quality, the specific way it moves through the world, which is not the movement of something that walks or flies or travels in any ordinary sense, but the movement of something that reduces, that makes the things it passes through less than they were, not by taking anything physical, but by taking the quality that makes them what they are, the way it took the quality of Solheim's organized civic life, while leaving the stones of Solheim standing. The way it is taking the quality of the Amber Road's connection, while leaving the road's stones intact. The force moves by reduction. It is not approaching him as a threat approaches a target. It is approaching as a reduction approaches everything around it, systematically and without preference. The crown's retrieval having simply added urgency to a movement that was already occurring and that would have reached the void's edge eventually regardless of whether he was here or not. He makes the decision to sleep at the void's edge. This is not an obvious decision. The edge is not a sleeping place. The Vigil's documentation makes no reference to sleeping at the edge. The tone of the edge's quality is not the welcoming quality of the significant places that have provided him with rest. But the journey has taught him something about sleep that he did not know before the herbalist's cottage. That sleep in the right place is not merely the absence of waking, but a specific act of reception, a making available of yourself to what the place has to give. And the void's edge has given him the Solheim vision and the recurring woman's sentence and the closer perception of the force's movement. And if the edge has more to give than sleep, is how he will be available to receive it. He does not know if the void's edge gives sleep. Perhaps it is not a sleeping place, and he will lie here in the edge's unusual air and its shifting stars and its thin present, and simply rest without sleeping, which is also a valid form of rest. He lies down on the last certain ground with the 3 fragments retrieved from the pack and placed in their triangle around him rather than inside the pack. The gray-white luminescence of the 3 fragments creating a triangle of light within which he rests. The light of the beginning of the crown's restoration surrounding him as he sleeps at the edge of the world that the crown was made to protect. The sleep that arrives at the void's edge is not like any sleep he has slept in the significant places. The verdant reach's sleep was organic, rising from the earth. The dragon's graveyard sleep was ancient, pressing from the incorporated dragon's warmth. The monk's cell sleep was designed, the specific sleep of completed understanding. The void's edge's sleep is temporal, not a descent into depth, but a settling into the present. The specific sleep of someone who is at the thin presence location and is simply being in it, resting in the thinness rather than resting in the depth, suspended in the membrane between the past and the future rather than going below the surface of either. The 3 fragments' gray-white light around him makes a triangle of luminescence that is the warmest thing at the edge tonight, warmer than the fire which has burned to coals, warmer than the void's edge's own luminescent air. He sleeps inside this triangle the way he slept inside the skull hollow on the first dragon's graveyard visit, with something around him and above him and below him that has been here longer than he has and will be here after he leaves and is, in his presence, most completely expressing what it is, the fragments most completely themselves in proximity to each other and to the person assembling them. The beginning of the whole most completely visible in the 3 gray-white points of light, surrounding the sleeping night at the edge of everything. While he sleeps inside the triangle of fragments, the fragments do something they have not done before. The 3 gray-white points of light, steady since he placed them in their triangle at the beginning of the night, begin to pulse. Not the slow gray-white pulse of the ash flowers, not the warmth pulse of the bone in the pack, but a faster and more complex pulse, the pulse of three things in the process of recognizing each other more fully than they have recognized each other before. The pulse of pieces of a whole thing that have been apart for so long that their reunion is not immediate but gradual, each recognition deepening the next. The three fragments light intensifying and then stabilizing at a slightly higher luminescence than before. The 3 points brighter than they were at the start of the night, brighter than any individual fragment has been at any point in the journey. The three together producing more than the sum of three, because what they are together is not three objects, but the beginning of one object. And the one object is beginning to be itself in the 3 points increasing luminescence. The void's edge's own luminescent air responds to this, very slightly, very subtly. The air within the triangle and in the immediate vicinity of the triangle showing a slightly warmer quality of light than the air outside it. The edge responding to the crown's materials activity the way the edge responds to everything, by making it more visible, by thinning the membrane between what it is and what it shows itself to be, by being the place where things most completely express what they are. The middle of the night at the void's edge is the middle of the thin present at its thinnest, the hour when the past and the future press most heavily against the membrane of the now, when the edge's permeability is at its maximum and the visions it produces are most available to whoever is present and attending. He is asleep and does not consciously experience this maximum permeability, but his body in the sleep that the void's edge provides is more receptive than his waking body would be, more open to the edge's qualities without the waking mind's need to categorize and evaluate and protect against the categories that cannot be evaluated. He receives, in the sleep, the quality of what the middle of the night at the edge holds without the specific content of a vision. The accumulated quality of Aethermoor's entire history pressing against him from the past, not as specific images, but as a weight of accumulated experience, the weight of everything that has ever been done in this world by everyone who has ever been in it, pressing against the present with the specific gravity of the past. He also receives, from the future's direction, a quality that is not specific but is directional, not a prediction, not an image of what comes, but the quality of possibility, the quality of something being prepared in the future's direction, something that the three fragments increasing luminescence is producing in the space between where he is and where the future is. The possibility of the crown's completion pressing backward from the future into the present with the same quality that the Solheim vision pressed forward from the past. In the sleep of the void's edge's thin present, he receives what the edge has been preparing since he arrived, not a vision, not the full pressing through of the past that the Solheim vision was, but a quality of knowledge, a knowing without seeing that is the edge's specific gift to those who sleep in the triangle of the fragment's luminescence. The fourth fragment. Its location arrives in the sleep not as a place he has been told about or a description he can examine, but as a direct knowing. The way you know the quality of warmth without needing to measure it. The way you know the quality of grief without needing to describe it. The fourth fragment is in the Amber Roads, not in any city, not in any building, not in the Wandering Inn or the Last Hearth, or any of the Amber Road's known significant places. It is in the road itself, in the section of the Amber Road stone that passes through the place where a city once stood and was reduced by the force before any current documentation of that city was made. The city whose existence is preserved only in the road's amber luminescence, in the specific quality of the light the road produces in that section, which is richer and warmer than the road's luminescence elsewhere. because the road has absorbed the memory of the city's torches and fires and hearths. The city's light preserved in the road's stone the way the dragon's graveyard's dragons are preserved in the valley's warm earth. The fragment is in the stone of the road, preserved by the road's capacity to absorb and retain what passes over it. The fourth fragment carried by the amber memory of a city that no longer exists in any other form. The hour before dawn at the void's edge is the hour when the thin present begins to thicken slightly in preparation for the day, when the past pressure against the membrane decreases by a fraction and the future's pressure remains, and the combination of the two is less equal than at midnight. The present slightly more itself, slightly more committed to being the present rather than the thin membrane between other times. The three fragments' luminescence has been increasing through the night and is at its highest now. In the hour before dawn, the gray-white light of the triangle surrounding the sleeping night more visible in the void's edge's pre-dawn quality than at any point in the night. The fragments asserting themselves in the present's slight thickening with an intensity that the thin present's maximum thinning did not produce, as though the fragments are most visible when the world is returning to its ordinary commitment to the present rather than at the extreme of the edge's thinness. The fire is completely out. The coal's cold. The void's edge does not maintain fires through the night the way the significant places do. The edge does not provide hospitality, does not hold the watch, does not maintain the conditions of rest in the active way that the verdant reach and the monk's cell and the dragon's graveyard do. The edge gives what it gives, and the night passes, and what was given is carried forward by whoever received it into the morning and the continuing journey. He wakes at the void's edge in the pre-dawn light with the three fragments' gray-white luminescence the first thing he sees, brighter than they were when he placed them in their triangle at the beginning of the night. The night's work of increasing recognition among the three fragments visible in the increase in their light. He lies inside the triangle for a moment before he moves, feeling the specific quality of waking at the edge, which is different from waking in every other significant place. At the verdant reach, he woke with the understanding intact and organized. At the dragon's graveyard, with the two-fragment correspondence warm against his body. At the monk's cell, with the assembly complete and the sleep of finished work behind him. At the void's edge, he wakes with more questions than he went to sleep with, which is the edge's gift. Not the resolution of questions, but the proper framing of them. The questions made more precise by the edge's permeability. The not knowing clarified from vague uncertainty into specific questions that can be worked toward. The crown is not what he was told it is. The fourth fragment is in the road stone in the place of the undocumented city. Malachar believes in something. Seraphine was aware of being seen. These are not resolved, but they are precise now in a way they were not before the night at the edge, and precision is the beginning of the kind of working toward that produces resolution. He picks up each of the three fragments carefully. The order reversed from the order of the journey. The ancient depths fragment first, the dragon's graveyard fragment second, the verdant reach fragment third, and places them back in the pack's intersection in the order that makes the most sense for what comes next, which is the amber roads and the fourth fragment in the road stone. The three fragments' gray-white luminescence does not fade when they are placed back in the pack. He can see it through the pack's leather, very faint but present. The pack itself slightly luminescent in the pre-dawn light of the void's edge. The first time the pack has been luminescent from the outside since the beginning of the journey. The three fragments' combined light, sufficient now to express itself through the material that contains them. He lifts the pack and feels its weight and the three warmths within it, and the luminescence that is barely perceptible against the brightening pre-dawn sky, but that is there. That will be there now for the rest of the journey. The three fragments' recognition of each other expressed in light that the pack cannot fully contain. The beginning of the crown's wholeness visible from the outside of the thing that carries it. He lifts Ashrender from beside where the fire was, and turns away from the void's edge and walks back toward the ordinary world. The edge does not mark his departure any more than it marked his arrival. It is simply there behind him as he walks. The luminescent air and the shifting stars and the thin present and the accumulated weight of everything Aethermoor has ever been pressing against the membrane of the now and occasionally pressing through for those who are present and attending with the right combination of objects and attention. He carries away from the edge, the Solheim vision and what it showed him, Seraphine's awareness of being seen, Malachar's believing face, the recurring woman's correction, the fourth fragment's location in the road stone, the three fragments' increased luminescence, and the specific quality of questions that the edge produces from vague uncertainty, precise, workable, the kind of questions that have answers rather than the kind that simply persist. The amber roads await him, south toward the section of road that passes over the undocumented city, toward the fourth fragment in the road's amber stone, toward whatever the Vigil's next direction will be when he finds them again, toward the completion of the crown that is not what he was told it is, but that he will continue assembling, because the assembling is what the journey is, and the journey is what he is, and what he is what Solheim started, and the starting has not finished, and will not finish until the crown is complete, and the force is visible, and whatever comes after the visibility can begin. The amber roads south from the void's edge in the morning have the quality that he has come to associate with mornings after the significant places, the road more itself, the amber luminescence more present, the quality of the walk more purposeful, the direction more clear. But there is something added to this morning's quality of walk that was not present in any previous significant place morning. The three fragments' luminescence through the pack, barely perceptible in the morning's growing light, but present. The pack itself slightly warm in the way that the pack has been warm from the bone's warmth since the dragon's graveyard. Now warm from three fragments' combined warmth rather than one bone's single warmth. He walks south with the void's edge behind him and the ordinary world of Aethermoor returning around him as the edge's qualities fade with distance, the air becoming less thin and more committed to being this specific present, the stars above settling into their fixed positions, the ground beneath him returning to its full commitment to being ground rather than the edge's dissolved suggestion of it, and the pack glowing very faintly against his back with the three fragments' recognition of each other. The light of the beginning of the crown's wholeness carried through the ordinary world toward the fourth fragment in the ordinary road. The journey is in its final phase, not its last steps. The fourth fragment is still ahead, and however many more fragments the crown requires after that are still ahead, and the crown's completion itself is still ahead, and whatever comes after the completion is the furthest ahead of all. But the quality of the journey has changed in the way that things change when they cross the point from which return is not possible. Not because the way back is blocked, but because the way back leads to something that no longer exists in the same form. The way that crossing the threshold of any significant change makes the thing before it inaccessible, not physically, but essentially. He was the person looking for the first fragment. He is now the person carrying three fragments toward the fourth, with the edge's questions in his mind and the edge's gifts in his pack, and the force behind him, and the Vigil survivors somewhere ahead on the amber roads, and the recurring woman's correction somewhere ahead of comprehension, but behind him in its delivery. The journey has become what it was always going to become when the preparation was complete. The doing of the thing the preparation prepared him for. The assembling of the crown by the person who was always going to assemble it. Walking through Aethermoor's significant places with the quality of attention that the significant places respond to in giving and receiving in the exchange, that is the specific relationship between the carrier and the carried toward, the walker and the walked toward. The ember and the fire it is still capable of starting. He walks the amber road south with the 3 fragments luminescence barely visible through the pack in the morning's growing light, and the 4th fragment in the road stone somewhere ahead, and the 4th somewhere behind, and the recurring woman's sentence somewhere between those 2 points in its implications, and Solheim visible in his memory, with a clarity it has not had since the fall, and Seraphine aware of being seen, and Malachar wearing the face of a man who believes he is right in all. Of it carried forward by the person who was trained to carry things that weigh more than they should be asked to carry, and who has been carrying this specific weight since the night the city fell, and who will continue carrying it until the crown is complete, and the force is visible, and the light that the 3 fragments are beginning to produce is the light that was made for exactly this darkness, and that this darkness has no idea is coming. Sleep well, traveler. The edge does not end. It simply becomes the beginning of what you were always walking toward, and the walking, which felt like approach, was arrival all along.